Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to today's Envoy Conversations event. We have a great discussion ahead of us, but before we get there are a few housekeeping items that I would like to go over. First, today's event is being recorded and all attendees will receive a copy of the recording. This will be sent out via email after today's live events, and you should receive that email tomorrow afternoon. If for whatever reason you do not receive that message, just please let us know and we'll be sure to send it your way. Additionally, we highly encourage you to ask some questions throughout the event today. To do so, you can type them in using the GoToWebinar Q&A box that you should see on your screen. So please feel free to type those questions in and we'll be sprinkling them in throughout today's event. So again, if you have any good questions, please go ahead and type them in and we'll try to get to them. And final housekeeping notes, please excuse any audio or video hiccups that may occur as a result of internet connections. We are not anticipating anything, but given the remote circumstances, internet may sputter out here and there. If you're experiencing severe difficulties, we find that signing out and then signing back in tends to fix most issues. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about Envoy Global for those that are unfamiliar with us. For nearly 20 years, Envoy has been on a mission to fix the inefficient, frustrating, and confusing immigration process. Envoy combines top-ranked legal teams with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. Envoy secures work authorization in over 100 countries, grown 37% year over year, and we work with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience that we provide. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dick Burke, CEO of Envoy Global, and he will be moderating today's session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric, and welcome. Good afternoon. Those on the East Coast, good morning. Yet to those out west, delighted to have you with us. We've got a terrific program today, headlined by two terrific panelists. Allow me to introduce them to you. Our topic is going to be about the next generation of HR professionals in global mobility. Delighted to have Rina Montalvo and Debbie Convery with us. As you can see on the screen, Rina is the Director of Special Projects, Global Mobility, Immigration, Taxation, Talent Acquisition Management at News Corp. News Corp owns a bunch of different brands, as you all know, Dow Jones being one of them. Debbie Convery is the Director of Global Talent Mobility at Nike. Both bring a host of experiences, which we'll talk about, to the job. And we're going to talk about how they got into their positions, what are they seeing, how are they seeing their positions evolve, how is global mobility evolving, what does the future hold? So delighted to have each of you with us. Rina and Debbie, thank you so much. And please, for those listening in, these conversations work best when folks ask questions. So please ask questions as we go along the way. We'll do our best to answer them in live time. So we look forward to those. A little bit of an introduction I put together. For many organizations, immigration and global mobility have been additional responsibilities for human resources practitioners in generalist roles or those overseeing broader functional areas like relo. But due to a consistently high demand for skilled candidates and the overall trend towards globalization, leading companies like News Corp, like Nike, have added more specialization within their HR teams in order to handle the increased volume of work around global mobility. How can companies recruit the next generation of talent with the requisite skills, and how can universities help address these things? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'd like to start let's start out with the background, Rina. Tell me a little bit about your background and what got you interested, Rina, in immigration and mobility.
Thank you, Dick. I think for me, my legal background kind of pushed me along to get into global mobility. Just go back into where I started off at General Motors. I was working in talent management, and there basically we were, assessing assessment centers for global mobility candidates. So that's basically kind of how I started looking into global mobility. And when I saw the complexity behind it, and there's a lot of legal aspect to it, I co-founded for the position, and I was very fortunate, and then to move on to News Corp, 21st Century Fox, and go into global recruitment and global mobility and continue my journey. So I've always been responsible for global mobility, immigration, and taxation throughout my role. So I think my legal background kind of stirred me in that direction. And then, you know, being at the right place at the right time, I would say.
Interesting. And tell us about your legal degree. I've got the law degree, which I love going to law school, and I'm delighted to have it. Do you find it helps you on a day-to-day basis, Rina?
Well, the reason I got a law degree is because, don't laugh, you know, I really love on my spare time criminal law. So I'm very much into, you know, watching the ID channel, reading about cases. So that's how the reason why I got my law degree. I didn't get my law degree because of global mobility. But it, you know, then I saw that it was helpful, because when we got into the complex state of taxation law or immigration law, I did find it, and I still do find it very useful, the understanding. Once you know law, it's easier to get into those, you know, the nitty-gritty of the complexity behind it, regardless if you're speaking about taxation or immigration or employment law. So yes, I find it very helpful.
Yeah, interesting. I do as well. I was a corporate lawyer got out of law school over 30 years ago, and I find every day I bring into elements I learned in law school into my work at Envoy Global. Just the way you think about issues and the way you can break down issues. So certainly not a prerequisite, but I find it very, very helpful. Debbie, tell us a little bit about your background. You started out in talent acquisition and then up mobility. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dick. It's a pleasure to be here. So first half of my career, I was in talent acquisition, as you mentioned. I worked for some really great leaders at T-Mobile USA that encouraged my transition from recruiting into more of a recruiting programs role, where I managed a number of talent programs like background check, candidate assessment systems, and mobility just happened to be one of those programs. At the time at T-Mobile, we had a pretty decent sized domestic relocation that was fairly mature, but a smaller international program that was not as evolved and required a really close partnership with Deutsche Telekom to build out the program. So the minute I got involved in that at T-Mobile, I was 100% hooked, and it's been my absolute passion ever since. I left T-Mobile to go to Amazon. At the time, T-Mobile was up for sale, and it looked like that international program wasn't going to continue to grow. I moved to Amazon and spent some time over in Luxembourg, which was a really incredible experience. And then for about the past 5 years have been at Nike. I'd have to say, you know, I didn't know about mobility that much. I definitely, throughout my recruiting experiences, had a lot of opportunity to hire folks on visas. So I did have some knowledge about immigration. Plus, I consider myself like someone that, like, mobility is in my blood. I was born in the UK, became a naturalized citizen in the US in 2012. I'm married to a Canadian national. So it was just when I found mobility as a function, like I said, found my passion and knew it was going to be my career. Can't imagine doing anything else. So that's my story. I don't have the, you know, the law background, and honestly, I would share, you know, if I think about one of the things I wish I knew kind of getting into mobility was really how technical some of the aspects are. So I totally resonate with both of you, what you're saying, like having that law degree or having the tax background. I wish I would have appreciated that a little bit more when I first got into the space and maybe spent some more time to build that expertise. I think of myself more of kind of a jack of all trades, and really like to focus on kind of the strategy and how mobility, you know, ties into an organization's talent strategy. But those technical aspects are so critical in what we're doing. Fortunately, I work with a lot of folks that, you know, have that technical expertise and are great partners, but totally appreciate what you're saying. I think having that background would be immensely helpful.
Interesting. I was going to thank you for that. I was going to ask you, what did you wish you knew? Because you both had similar paths, and we find it so often at Envoy Global. So many of our clients, the situation, someone sort of inherits immigration or inherits mobility, and it's incredibly complex, both into the US, which we do at Envoy, and globally, which we do. And so we try to have a very robust thought leadership program and training and educational materials like that. What do you wish you knew when you made that transition You mentioned the technical, Debbie. Spend a little more time on that just for a second, or other things you wish you knew going in, and we're going to talk about that later when we talk about university programs.
Yeah, I just don't think I appreciated the depth of expertise required around tax, around immigration. I wish I would have known that, and like I said, appreciated it more. Employment law, corporate tax, labor, there's so many different aspects. It's what excites me, but it's also like what creates the biggest challenge. There's no way you can be an expert in all of those different fields, but we definitely have to appreciate the complexity of what we're doing and make sure that we're engaging with the right people. And I think when I first got into this space, I was like, how difficult could this really be? That's a joke. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. And I think coronavirus last year, the challenges that we went through and that we're still going through really tested that. There's just so many various angles and that we need to kind of take into consideration and have the right folks at the table kind of in developing the strategy and making decisions. I guess that's what I would share. Rina, anything, what are your thoughts? What do you wish you knew?
I think it's amazing. Thank you so much for saying that, because I think that's what's helped me along the way, especially now with COVID. When I came, to News Corp and, COVID hit, my position was elevated to reporting then to the SVP of News Corp HR, due to the fact because I had the knowledge and taxation, corporate tax and immigration. So it's very useful. And I think, Debbie, the way you said everything, I can just agree with it 100, 200%. I think that our, global mobility is not anymore. I think the position is elevating, and because of all those points that you said, Debbie. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one of the things I find fascinating about the space we all work in, about the breadth of it and also the depth of it. Think of all the different countries, all the different tax, employment law, immigration issues, and it's like putting a puzzle together. So it's very intellectually stimulating to me. It's one of the things I find fulfilling. I think most fulfilling is just the mission of letting people live their most fulfilling lives. But that puzzle is really quite stimulating as well. And that's a good segue into the second thing I wanted to get your thoughts on. Too often it seems people think of global mobility as just about moving people, and it's a very outdated and very limiting and unfair conception. Why do you think that is, and how do we expand and modernize people's understanding of this? Because in doing that, then we can get the universities to help start with the training. So tell me a little about that, Debbie. Why do you think I guess the first question, do you agree with me that people do have this outdated conception that's just about moving people?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important that we rebrand ourselves truly as mobility. And I really like to emphasize the talent part of talent mobility as well too. And stop just talking about relocation, because it's, to your point, Dick, it's absolutely not just about moving people from A to B. And literally, I'm having those conversations every day, helping educate the partners that I work with, that we're not just looking at the individuals that are moving. It's such a broader picture. So I really think it's about rebranding and educating the stakeholders that we work with, and rebranding mobility, one, as a talent function, and two, to be as inclusive as it is of all of the different pillars that we encompass, meaning, immigration, all the things that we've just been talking about. And also that we position mobility as a strategic, a function, a strategic enabler of the organization's talent strategy. So I know that there's a lot of conversation about this kind of rebranding effort, and I know that there's a lot of effort going, on every day, kind of in that rebranding process. And I think that that's just something that we all need to continue to kind of talk about and, like I said, educate our stakeholders and customers on.
I could not agree with you more. There's so much opportunity out there, but it's entirely dependent on getting the people in the right places. So I love that the focus on the talent word, in addition to the mobility word. Rina, has that been your experience too, that people have a very sort of outdated and limited conception of what you and Debbie do and what the function does?
I mean, look at the state we're in now with COVID, right? I think if we think about, if somebody asks me or Debbie, what are the three main pillars right now in your everyday work? I would say policy, immigration, global payroll, and taxation, right? I would not say whatsoever relocation. Not right now. Relocations are put on hold. We're busy as ever. And why? We're not moving as much, but why are we even busier than before? Because our focus right now is on strategy, is really on rebuilding global mobility. What does that mean? Being asked to do job assessment, be involved in recruitment. How are we hiring employees? How remote, which jobs are going to be remote? If we hire somebody in a remote position where we don't have an entity and they need a visa. So all these there's other complexities behind it. So I think that the business, the C-suite, the executives are starting to see really what global mobility means. And I think they're starting to understand how complex and how important our role is becoming. If that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Please, Debbie.
Oh, sorry, Dick. I was just going to add one example that I think is a really relevant one. A hot topic right now is around remote workers. And the funny thing is about remote workers, they're not actually moving anywhere, right? So, we would consider them as part of, a mobile workforce, right? But there's some education that goes along with that. I think the first reaction is, well, they're not moving. Why would mobility, support that type of a program? But I think that really just speaks to how mobility is expanding and evolving. We're not just looking at people that are moving. We're looking at the remote workers. We're looking at people that are traveling on business, right? I mean, there's all sorts of different aspects of mobility that alternative assignments that are just continue to kind of expand and push our function. And we have the expertise to support, those different programs, right? So that's why we're kind of a natural function to do that work. But I think the remote worker is a great example of that's not somebody that's moving, but that's someone that's part of typically most organizations' mobile workforce.
You said, Rina, please.
Sorry, just really quickly say, because Debbie just brought up a great point. Right now you see even universities writing out, Harvard, for example, writing out articles on, hey, everybody can work from anywhere, and why it's so important to work from everywhere and how the productivity is increasing, but they're really not thinking about the complete other aspects of it, taxation, again, immigration. So I think, this topic also as well, educating, since we're going to go into universities shortly, also educating the universities on, listen, there's a difference about working from anywhere in a remote policy, so I think first identifying and showing, the business and everyone, the difference between, how can we have employees working remotely or from anywhere with risk and compliance, compliance, right? I don't know if I made sense, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Without a doubt. I think, and well said. Thank you for that, Rina. What I was going to say is, talent mobility is such a perfect phrase. And what has COVID done? Even though folks haven't moved, like you said, Debbie, are there tax issues in light of COVID? Yes. Are there labor and employment issues? Yes. Are there compensation issues? Yes. Are there immigration issues? Yes. So it really is. It's so much broader, and I do think that's points to the need for more formalized training around this. So I'd like to turn our attention to the role that universities in particular can play, because look, Debbie started TA, now into talent mobility. Rina, similar path. What role can universities play? So Rina, you've got quite an interesting background. You're knocking off and have affiliations with most of the leading universities, it seems, Harvard Business School and Yale and NYU for starters. So tell us a little bit how that got started, and tell us what are you finding in terms of interest and in terms of need at these schools?
Well, I started off with NYU, and basically it was, again, being at the right place at the right time. I had a colleague of mine who was the head of global mobility at Bombardier in Berlin, and he was coming to New York to lecture at NYU. And he was German, I'm German, so he invited me to the course. And then afterwards we had dinner, and the professor asked me if I would be interested, knowing that I had a law degree background, if I would be interested to be a guest lecturer. So that's basically how it started. And Harvard started off with you, Dick, having a meeting with you, telling you that I will be teaching at NYU, and you introducing me to the Harvard Business School professor who then I went and interviewed and was able to be a guest speaker. And it all started off with their interest in taxation. When the travel ban hit, they wanted to know about immigration and taxation. How was that going to change? So, and then working from anywhere. So I think global mobility has been attracted, the university has been attracted to global mobility in HR sector in terms of how does global mobility work and what does it really mean? What does global mobility really mean? So I think their interest has always been there, but I don't think they really understood as to, I think they took it as in the beginning, global mobility, oh, Rina's gonna come and talk about how she moves employees all over the world. So,
Yeah,
and then when
that's really interesting. Take us back to that old conception around we just move people around. So interesting.
And then when I came in and started teaching and explaining what is global mobility and what falls under global mobility, that's when the universities were like, wait a second, this is more complex than we think. Oh, this is, we want to integrate this more into HR. And a lot of the students' feedbacks were a lot about, oh my God, I'm interested in taxation law, or I'm interested in immigration law. So I think that's how it basically kicked off. And that's how the interest has increased, sort of saying.
Really interesting. And now I understand that you're going to be also presenting at Cornell and Stanford. Is that correct?
Yes, it was supposed to start in 2020, but due to COVID, everything has been, delayed a bit. Debbie and I were supposed to start at NYU in February. The semester started, and now we're going to be starting in March. And the reason, if I can jump in and say why I picked Debbie and why Debbie's coming to NYU is because, as Debbie mentioned, she started off as well as talent management, but I've worked with Debbie, I think, Debbie, 3 years now. Yeah. We've been speaking together. I've seen how she said, Debbie is somebody that comes in, she might know a little bit of immigration, but really quickly, the next time we spoke together, she knows a lot more. So I thought that would be really, really great for the students to understand, since mobility is being tied into talent management, for somebody to come in and kind of give their experience, their journey of how they're expanding their role as well quickly, which Debbie's doing. So, she I think will be a great role model for the students, and I think they're going to love her once she starts.
I think they will too.
Oh, sorry, Dick, go ahead.
I was going to agree. I think they're going to love to hear your experiences. My gosh, helping Amazon grow, helping Nike grow, amazing.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think what Rina is doing in this space, it's really a passion project of mine, and I'm so excited to be partnering with her. This is something that we have a shared passion between us both, but Rina, more so than anybody else in our industry, I think has been a trailblazer in this space, and actually lecturing at some of these top universities. I'm really excited to be partnering her with this. I really believe that there's an opportunity for universities to be playing a more active role kind of in our function. I think back to an experience that I had when I was finishing my degree. I took an HR class and went through all of the different functions of HR. And I think in the whole class, there was maybe one mention of the word relocation. And I actually went to my professor and kind of challenged that maybe we weren't being as forward thinking kind of in the academic environment about what HR really is kind of evolving to. And he had a good point. He said, HR is pretty complex. This is a business, degree. We're just trying to kind of teach people the basics, and probably mobility is a more kind of advanced, complex topic. But I actually kind of challenged that back. I mean, I really think there's a couple of different, avenues for universities to take around, kind of integrating mobility into their curriculums. One is just to provide increased capabilities to future managers and leaders that may eventually work in organizations, for more multinational companies that operate globally, that have distributed workforces, and need to have some basic understanding around global human resources issues. Things like cross-cultural communication, recruitment and selection, employment law. Those are all, I think, really basics that most managers need to have some knowledge of, or at least awareness of. So that's one opportunity, I think, for universities. Second is to really provide programs for students to learn about mobility as a function, as a viable career. I think it's really funny when you talk to people about how they came into mobility. There's not a lot of people that this was an intentional career, right? There's not a lot of people that said, I went to school for this, and that's what my career ended up being. Wouldn't it be so cool if we had, in universities, a global mobility curriculum or degree program to actually build our future bench strength for our industry? Like, that is my kind of long-term career goal, and I know, not career goal, sorry, long-term, goal, not career, goal, and I know Rina really kind of shares in that passion. The third opportunity, I think, for universities is just to provide programs for mobility professionals like ourselves that want to grow and expand in our expertise and knowledge. We were talking about, having a legal background, or wouldn't it be great if universities offered classes, curriculum in that space? So that's where I see a really big opportunity, kind of in the university space, kind of in those three different buckets.
Really, really thoughtful, Debbie. Thank you for that. It's interesting. We do all sorts of surveying, which we put out these reports. And one of the statistics that really stuck in my head is that we know that 70% of millennials want a cross-border experience before they're in their early 30s. And it just speaks to the amount of demand for interest in these things, which you would think would give rise to more formalized education. And I also love what you say about continuing education opportunities for people, because so many people we come across have been thrust into the immigration or the mobility function without the training that you're now able to provide to others. So I think those are great ideas. Two questions have come in, so I'm going to take us back to something you said, Debbie, a few moments ago. We were talking about why do people have this very limiting and outdated conception around mobility? And the question is, would you suggest rebranding the term global mobility if it confuses? If you could rebrand away from global mobility, what would you call it? And I think, Debbie, you said maybe talent mobility.
I did, and I very intentionally say talent mobility. I almost, I'm okay leaving the global off. Some people say global talent mobility, like that's fine too. I think by nature it's just automatically global, but I think the talent is where the emphasis is. This is talent mobility. It really ties it as a talent program, and then it helps us kind of make that connection as to what we're really trying to do, which is enable the organization's talent strategy. So that is absolutely what I would rebrand it to. And I have conversations about folks all the time about why I'm very intentional about saying talent mobility versus using any other term. I don't know, Rina, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have, what do you?
I would, I agree with you. I mean, I like the global, just because I just find it, as I mentioned many times, I just find it that people need to really, because it's rebranding, global talent mobility, just people need to be aware that it's global. You can't, it's just, and I don't know if this is too hard the way I'm saying it, but I don't think it's enough just to know U.S. immigration or just to know. So I think the global, for me, I would want to leave it, Debbie. So I would want to keep it as global talent mobility.
Okay,
that sounds good to me. GTM, it's a new acronym.
There you go. This is the ultimate diplomatic answer. My sense is probably both. I do think, I very much agree with you, Debbie, about talent. We find that the most successful companies are the ones that put the employee front and center. That's why we're so focused on our service delivery to them, and I'm proud of our NPS that the most sophisticated companies, the successful ones, are all about that employee experience. So I love the focus on that. But the global is hard to deny. It's interesting. Since I joined Envoy just a few years ago, our global business this year will be bigger than the entire business when I joined, which is speaking to the growth of our global business, which is a reflection of those we serve and their global needs. So hard to exclude other. A more technical question just came in also. How do fully distributed companies with no physical presence manage to employ talent in any country and navigate the tax and immigration compliance issues? So if it's a fully distributed company, how do they employ talent in any country and navigate the tax and immigration compliance issues? Thoughts on that one?
I mean, if a company is going to start employing, employees in a certain location, I'm assuming they have a strategy behind it. So they will have to register the entity and just go through the whole, process of it. I don't think there's any company out there, maybe right now in the moment, due to the fact of COVID, that they have people are working in locations where there is not an entity for a short period of time. But I mean, future-wise, they will have to register the entity and follow compliance and with payroll and all that. So I think you can do it for a certain amount of time and for a certain situation, as right now with COVID. But my experience is registration of an entity and going through the whole process.
Thank you. Debbie, anything you'd add to that one?
No, I would agree. I do love talking to my peers about in the industry about how they are managing their programs, because I think there are a lot of headlines out there around companies letting employees work anywhere. And sometimes I wonder if that could be deceiving. Like maybe that's the employees work anywhere, temporarily during COVID. And as Rina said, that is a strategy companies are employing, on a temporary basis. When we've started to hear some companies say like this is going to be ongoing, I find it really fascinating to talk to those peers about how the entity is structured, how they are supporting that program. And I think this is where we really get challenged of trying to enable the business and the business strategy, but also making sure that we're also managing risk for the company as well too. So it's a delicate balance, but it's challenging. It's not that easy to just employ, employees anywhere, but that's our function, is really to figure out how do we enable that business strategy if that's the direction the company wants to go.
I wholly agree. And I think it's one of the fascinating things about the space we get to play in, that if the trend is going to be, and who knows for how long, people, living where they wish and working from there, all the issues attendant in global talent mobility around that, whether it's the tax issue, the immigration issue, the labor employment issue, the compensation issues, we would be fools to pretend those issues don't exist. How can we enable our companies to take advantage of this trend or not be left behind because of it? I think it's one of the most fascinating parts of our work right now, because it's so novel and it's so important. Here in Chicago, we've been pretty lucky in many regards that we have not had enormous presence from Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Oracle, et cetera, for tech talent. But now as they think about moving to work from anywhere, how are we as employers in Chicago going to respond to that? Are we going to have to allow the same amount of flexibility? How do we protect our own people from those things? So really a fascinating time for us. So
I think that the war for talent is like completely evolving, because now that war for talent is truly global, right? Yeah, it's interesting.
I think also what to keep in mind is that a lot of companies are saying, look, you can work from whatever location if we have an entity there, or they'll register one. But there's companies that are doing pay cuts. They're saying if you want to work out of Florida and we have an entity there, that's fine, but you're going to get the compensation that Floridians get. So I think it's very complex than just to say, how are we, the war on talent. I think at the end it's very black and white, as we say in law. I don't think it's that complex. I don't think there'll be, oh, well, this company's doing this, so we have to compete with them, because I think it'll be the same for everyone. Are you going to register a company in Minnesota just for one employee? Or are you going to tell the employee, listen, you need to work in a location where we have other employees, or we'll register maybe 50, we can register it. So I think it's very complex and it's not that easy kind of to define.
Yeah, I think well said. In light of that complexity, and in light of how dynamic and fluid the situation is right now, how uncertain this new age will last, lay on top of that the fact that universities, while building their programs, don't have decades of experience doing this. What advice would you give to companies seeking to hire professionals in the mobility function? And what advice would you give to those seeking to build up their skill set getting into mobility, whether it's from TA or another function within a company? Debbie.
Yeah, I think back to a session that Rina and I did a year or two ago, maybe in New York, where we kind of did a presentation, and I loved what she did. She reached out to a professor at New York University, invited him to attend the session, and he brought a couple of his students. And the whole session, they were just, and we were, of course, it was a roundtable with about 15 corporate folks in New York. But I loved that Rina kind of brought those students into our, kind of discussion in our space for them to like learn and grow. So I guess that's one thing that I would encourage, students or folks that are younger in their profession, participate in industry events. There's a lot of different programs that will allow students to attend. You can also find a mentor in the industry. I mean, Rina has mentored, several of these students, and like I said, kind of then brings them in. I know I had mentored somebody that was really junior in her career and was able to bring her into, sessions with senior level mobility leaders, into discussions for her to kind of participate and learn. So participate in industry events, seek out a mentor in the industry. And leverage the educational resources that are out there. I mean, there are some. There's different programs through ERC, through SHRM, different accreditations you can get. And, those, the value of those long term, I think that's, to be determined, but I think there are a good way to at least learn about the function. It's what we have today. It's what we have today until we can really develop programs, in universities and have global mobility curriculum. So those are just a few ideas.
Rina, anything to add to that while the universities get going?
Debbie, I thought you were going to talk about when we saw Tina Turner and we spoke.
That's for another webinar.
No, I totally forgot about that. I did invite. So yeah, I think Debbie's right about that. Inviting, students to come and, listen to us. Hopefully when things open up, Debbie and I can invite students to the Nike campus, for example. So that's for the students to really, for them to really understand, have this broad knowledge, please. Yeah, don't specialize in one aspect of it, but have that broad knowledge. And I think for companies, I think is to really, look for talent that that is, they might not have, like Debbie said before, they don't need to know everything, but if they want to learn, right? I think as long as they want to learn and they want to broaden their horizons and learn a little bit of immigration law and taxation, I think that would be great. That's what they should look for, in my opinion.
Thank you. And I'll tell you, we find again, this fact pattern is so common of people being thrust into this function. That's why we have a very, very robust program at Envoy to put out educational content that is much more digestible than perhaps what some law firms would put out. We say we want to take the Latin out of the law to try to make the material a bit more digestible, comprehensible, with no sacrifice in quality or depth, because there is this real yawning need still, and while the universities ramp up. While we've been talking other.
Dick, can I just make one follow-up point to what you just shared? Because I think right now is a really unique time in our space. Typically, we host like events at a location. It's invite only. There's a cost. There's an investment. I think we're in a really unique period right now with everything being available virtually. There's so many learning opportunities out there right now. It's incredible. I mean, I try and balance my calendar to attend as much as I can. It's challenging, but I really try and carve out that time because I personally want to continue to grow and develop as well too. But there's so many opportunities out there right now that are free, that are accessible. This is actually a perfect time. One other thing I just wanted to share is there are, I wanted to call out, there are a couple of programs kind of in this space developing that I think are really interesting to look at. One is work that the Expertise Academy has done. They created a certificate program with Erasmus University, which is in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. I actually had the opportunity to attend a class that was part of this program, and I love what they're doing. So Expertise Academy, they built the curriculum, and we're able to integrate the curriculum into the universities, into the program. It's not a global mobility degree, but it's a certificate program. So I think some really interesting work in that space. The one opportunity there is for them to take that a little bit more global because it's really more European focused. But secondly, I wanted to just share there is a professor at the University of Texas at Dallas that is doing some really interesting work in this space as well. He has a number of classes that feature kind of global mobility within his international business program. And he's looking at really kind of evolving that. His name is Professor Zydorek, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I've had a couple of conversations with him, and I'm really excited about what he's doing in this space. The one other thing I would just say is I feel like there's a lot of growing, so Rina and I, this has been our heart project for a while, but there's a lot of real growing interest in this space, and a lot of really good energy. There's been some LinkedIn posts and conversations, and so it's pretty exciting where this may be going. I think one of the best pieces of feedback that I have received is that if we want to, develop these programs in universities, we have to prove out the demand, and there has to be a financial benefit for the university. At the end of the day, they're for profit, right? So we have to prove out the demand, and there has to be a financial benefit for the university. And that's probably where, one of our biggest challenges is what is that demand? And, what is that financial benefit for a university to kind of invest in this type of program? But I think it's really exciting. Like I said, just kind of the energy in the space.
Yeah, it's so true about the universities. They have to see the demand for them to put on to offer the curriculum. So thank you for saying that. And for those listening, it's Professor Hubert Zydorek, Z-Y-D-O-R-E-K, Hubert Zydorek. So check him out, as well as the Expertise, E-X-P-A-T-I-S-E Academy at Erasmus University in Europe. Thank you so much for those. A really thoughtful question came in while you were talking there. We've been focused on, I'll call it more of the harder skills, or the skills specific to global talent mobility. This listener asked, I think a key skill for a mobility professional is asking the right questions in ambiguous situations. What would you both say are other skills required to be successful in your space?
Rina, do you want to take that, Rina?
You can take it, Debbie. Go ahead.
You know what? That's a really interesting question. And one of the conversations that I had with Professor Zydorek was around what are the competencies that are required in mobility, because that's really how they're kind of looking at it, is building out competencies. And I'm just opening it up because I put some kind of work towards it. A couple of things, asking the right questions, absolutely agree. Being consultative, really like looking at it from that perspective, having strong business acumen, financial acumen is another competency that I think is really important in our space. Vendor management is another one that I think sometimes we take for granted. I mean, if you just even look at vendor management, the work that's involved there with contract, with negotiations, developing KPIs, SLAs, I mean, that's a whole competency kind of skill set on its own. Those are a few that come to mind kind of immediately. But again, it was, like I said, really ties into some of the questions that Professor had in terms of building out the program. They're really looking at what are the competencies that need to be developed kind of in this type of a program. Of course, those are all above and on top of the foundational competencies that we've already talked about, right? That are just kind of key in terms of, the functional knowledge around relocation, immigration, and tax.
Thank you for that. Rina, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I would add, flexibility, be prepared, preparation is key, and flexibility, basically, I would add to those points. Good points, Debbie, good points.
I'd add, two that came to mind, curiosity. You need to have an open-mindedness to issues that could arise, and you need to have a real solution-oriented mindset. I was lucky when I started out as a lawyer, we were trained that the best lawyers are solution providers. It's all too easy for a lawyer to say no. The best lawyers are the ones that can say yes without taking on risk or unnecessary risk. So that mindset of solving the Rubik's Cube or finding the way to make something happen, I think is another skill that would serve someone well in the global talent mobility space as well. So
totally, you know what, Dick, I totally resonate with that. And it brings me back to one of the earlier things we talked about in terms of how we evolve our function, because I think mobility maybe prior might have had there might have been a perception that, you know, around being the policy police, the one saying no, you know, it's really about how we find the yes, like how we, you know, or find the options. It may be, well, that might not work, but what about this or that, you know? So I think you brought up something there really that's important for us to continue to evolve our function. We absolutely need to be thinking about those guardrails and the risks, but we at the end of the day, we need to figure out what the solutions are. And I think that's one of the key ways that we really evolve and rebrand our function.
And just to add to that, you know, it's basically not true if somebody would say, oh, we're totally risk and compliance when it comes to global mobility. I would really want to check that out, because I think there is a level of risk that we all have to take in whatever company you're in whatever global mobility position you're in. But I think it's having that knowledge to be able to give out all options and to manage the risk, right?
Yeah.
I think it's, you said, Dick, it's to really have that knowledge and to be able to be flexible, and to really, you know, give those options and manage those risks that we have to all take, right?
Exactly. I think it extends beyond global talent mobility to the HR function. In the past, I've called HR, the bad HR departments are basically the no police. The leading ones are the ones that find the ability to get to yes. And it's interesting, there's an interesting trend I'm seeing, hearing about, that increasingly some of the more successful folks in HR don't start out in HR, but they start in business and migrate into HR because they understand the business's need to get people in the right place and to find ways to make things happen versus to instinctively say no. So it'll be interesting to see whether that trend continues. I'm glad it resonated with you. A couple other comments came in. Love to get reactions. One of my favorite customers, Marianne Trichak at iValua down in the Silicon Valley area, adds intercultural awareness is a competency too. I think that is imperative. Rina and Debbie nod their heads along. Empathy, people nod their heads along. A question then came in, can you share any additional learning resources for the global talent mobility professional? And before I pass it to you, Rina and Debbie, Yuki Watanabe from Gap, who's very thoughtful. Everyone's saying hello to Yuki. Everyone knows Yuki. The Yuki fan club here between the three of us, Yuki. Yuki suggests that ERC start a scholarship program to send people to these university programs. I think that's a terrific idea, Yuki.
I love that idea. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. So Yuki's actually former Nike, so she's part of our family. So thanks for the idea, Yuki. I totally agree. I do think that ERC has a place to play in this space. I don't know if any who might on this call was on the town hall. I actually asked a question about that, and Lynn did address it, about what kind of role ERC will have kind of in, you know, working with universities and integrating mobility into, you know, more academic curriculum and whatnot. Her answer was definitely she realizes it's important, but I think she was also thinking about what their priorities are. There's a lot on their plate, right? So I think it's something that it hopefully is on their radar. Actually, the class that I attended as part of at the Erasmus University, Lynn was actually a part of that class as well too. So I definitely know she's aware. I just, you know, believe that they have some, you know, they're kind of looking at their priorities. But I love that idea, Yuki, and I think that's worth bringing up with ERC.
So I think that's a brilliant idea. And I think that's the best place or role that the ERC can play, is really putting that up. And because I do feel that, you know, being able to teach at these universities and lecture, I do feel that the place should be in the universities, to be completely frank. That's just, you know, my opinion. So I do think that it would be good if they put up a scholarship for that. That would be a great way they can, you know, play a role into it. I don't really in the moment see it as them making a course for global mobility, that would be as defined as Ivy League school, for example, university. So I do still see it really in the universities, just like a law degree, global mobility degree. I think it fits in the universities in the moment for me.
Yep,
My
agreed.
opinion.
Thank you. Let's look out onto the horizon as we wrap up here. The global talent mobility function in 5 years, how will it be different in your mind than it is now? Hopefully folks will be better educated, there'll be more continuing education, they'll have a better notion that it's not just relo, they'll have these soft skills that folks enumerated a moment ago. How else do you think it'll be different, Debbie?
I think we're just going to. I think we're going to continue to expand. I think I heard something. There was a conversation. I think it was on LinkedIn a couple of days ago that I was listening to. Is like, is mobility, dead? And I couldn't be more far off. I think, and actually the person that was being interviewed said the same exact thing. I think we're going to continue to expand, continue to support the alternative types of assignments. I think we're going to continue to have to get more creative, especially as our, organizations have, distributed workforces and more remote, employees. So I see opportunity on the horizon. Like, I think there's no better time to be in this function. I think it's going to continue to expand. I think it will continue to get more evolve. And, we're going to have to our businesses are going to, change. We need to be able to adapt and be flexible. And yeah, like I said, I see so much opportunity on the horizon. That's kind of if I was to look 5 to 10 years out, that's what I'm seeing. Thank you.
Rina.
Yeah, and I see it as it's gonna, like Debbie, I totally agree, of course, with what you said. I see it as a function, complete, huge function as compensation and benefits or recruitment. I think, global talent mobility, right? I think it's gonna be its own function just because of all the complexity and all the aspects under it. I think it'll be more centralized, at least I hope, with taxation, immigration being under one and not being spread out throughout the organization. That's what I think.
One of the things I would like to see happen, and I don't know if this will, but I would love to see mobility. We talk about reporting structures a lot, like where mobility sits within organizations. And while I don't think that totally is a major barrier, because I think you can kind of get over that. Like right now, we sit in total rewards, but that doesn't mean we can't partner with other functions within HR just as easily. But what I do hope to see in the future is a shift in the evolution of mobility sitting within the talent function, whether that's talent management, talent acquisition. I think that makes more, I think there's a lot of synergy there. And it would be kind of, I think, a representation of mobility really being recognized as a talent function. So I don't know if that's going to happen in 5 years, but I certainly hope, I hope that does. And I do think we are seeing some trending where mobility is starting to move over into, talent functions. I think that's really exciting. So I guess we'll see.
I think it would underscore the centrality of the employee to the whole mission too, which I think would be a positive, which we see the leading companies doing, putting everything around the employee experience for very good reasons. So that'll be interesting. Let me ask another educational question. Biggest mistake you've seen young people younger in their careers in global talent mobility make?
I don't know the answer. I only do U.S. immigration. I only do taxation. I don't know. I'm not an employment lawyer. So that's really something that really, as you can tell, irritates me. I think you really, really, really have to broaden that knowledge. And I'll just continue on saying that. That's what's helped me. And look, it's not like I planned it. Like we've said, I didn't plan to come into global mobility, right? I thought I was going to do something with criminal law, to be completely honest. Criminal law and global mobility far away from each other, but it's helped me, luckily, to be able to speak about all these different types of important assets, essential assets in global mobility. So that's, I get really irritated when I hear, I don't know, because that's delays a lot of the, the process.
Yeah, very limiting.
Yeah. Totally agree with that. One of the things I would add, and maybe not a mistake as much as an opportunity, is I think in this function, it's really helpful if we can walk the walk. And when if someone hasn't moved, even domestically within the U.S., or better yet, move cross-border, or take an assignment, or one-way permanent transfer, to have that experience as a mobility professional, I think is really important. To understand the complexity of it, to understand the challenges of it. I was just speaking to someone the other day that moved just domestically, and we think we're experts, right? Like, we've got this, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy for you. It's not that easy for your family. And I think having those experiences helps us, renew that empathy, one of the competencies we talked about that is so important, and reminds us of what we're doing. Like, we are really trying to provide a good experience and help someone land and get them settled in and help them be productive at work and help their family. It kind of grounds us on what is our purpose. So again, not a mistake, but if someone's early in their career, I'd really encourage them to take that international opportunity, move to a different state. Like, for me, that has been so beneficial. I know we're running short on time, but I, moved my family as I shared, when I worked for Amazon to Luxembourg, and my family actually had a really challenging time kind of settling in, and it was completely unexpected, and really challenged. It brought us closer together as a family. We certainly learned a lot. When we moved to Portland, it was like so easy, but it really helped me appreciate, like, what we're doing is very challenging, and we have a really big purpose in terms of how we serve our employees. So I think that's just something that I would, I hope that every mobility has the, opportunity to experience. I think it's, very valuable.
Yeah,
I agree.
Rina.
No, I agree. I mean, it was hard for me to leave over 25 years Europe to come to New York in 2014. I had the shock of my life, right? So, and I really, I really understand why they had a shock going to Europe. So I do think it's essential. Like you said, 70% of millennials want to have that cross-border experience. So I totally agree with that. But I really think they should go overseas. APAC, EMEA, get that experience, 1 year, 6 months. If you're able to do it, do it. And I think companies should start implementing that as a kind of, doing that can take you to the next management level, having that experience living abroad for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, a perfect way to close out. I'll tell you, at Envoy, we do a couple things. We seek out, within the bounds of the law, people who have migrated from one country to another, because they've walked that walk. They know the criticality, and they bring that sense of empathy and concern that we think helps drive the NPS. So we consciously do it. At the 7-year mark, everyone is sort of kicked out of the office for a month. We want them to go overseas to experience what it feels like to be in a foreign land. Again, I think it'll be enriching for them and enriching for the service we provide. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you joining us, Debbie, Rina. Thank you. I feel like we've sat in on like a Harvard class today or a Stanford class that you teach. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. And I hope you found it helpful. I hope you learned something. Have a good day, a good rest of the week, and a great weekend. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.